Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast.
You are now listening to season 6 of the show.
I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by David Turney. David is the co-founder and managing partner of boutique law firm Avery Law. He began his career at Allen & Overy before moving to GCM Global Energy PLC. David specialises in including corporate finance, fundraising in the legal tech sector, and much more. This has been astonishing because he's also been awarded Best Fundraising Lawyer by SME Legal Awards 2021 and shortlisted for the Rising Star Innovation Award at the Legal Innovation Awards 2020. So, a very, very warm welcome, David.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And before we dive into all your amazing projects and experiences to date, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality?
Yeah, so it is a fantastic show, and it's funny because my wife and I used to watch this in the early stages of our relationship many moons ago, and that was probably the closest she got to being interested in what I did as a career. I have to say it's probably somewhere on the lower end, but I'm gonna play it safe and say 5. Generally because it's how I would like our legal career to sort of move towards in the fact that it glorifies it somewhat, and then obviously the fact that it's just not really true.
Well, I think you've justified the 5 very well, and as I always say, we will move swiftly on to talk all about you. So obviously I gave a very brief snapshot there in the intro, but let's start at the beginning. Would you mind telling our listeners just a bit about your background and journey?
Yeah, sure. So just sort of thinking back to sort of early days, childhood, and sort of where I came from. I was brought up just outside in the home counties out in Hertfordshire. Growing up in Hertfordshire, probably with friends, and you kind of always knew that you would end up in London. I always remember those trips. There's probably the shopping trips into Oxford Circus with my parents coming in, thinking, "Wow, this city," but always sort of knowing I would end up there one way or another. And I suppose thinking about how I got into law, and there's not really a sort of eureka moment in that sense. I just remember a lot of times I used to sit down with my grandfather. He was one of those individuals who would snip out things from newspapers and bring them down to me when we saw them.
Yeah.
And he brought me this one article, and I can't remember exactly the title, but he just remember how he was tapping on it, with his finger, and he would say, M&A boy, that's where you want to be, corporate M&A, and sort of dashing this paper at me. And I just always remember that. And it wasn't that I necessarily wanted to get into corporate law or anything like that. I actually had a huge passion. But at school, I had a huge passion for not only technology, but actually graphic design. I used to bore you with the stories, but I used to build a lot of websites at school and at university. But aside from that, I used to do a lot of 3D modeling on computers, designing cars and modeling them out using software. And I just had this real passion for it. It was a real hobby of mine, and I really wanted to move into that career. But I don't remember who it was, but they just said, that's lovely, and I love that you have a passion for it, but why don't you just do a law degree just in case? So that's kind of how I got into the law.
I love that story. And no, I didn't know that you had those previous interests. And I can just picture your grandfather coming in with that snippet, just sort of pointing, saying M&A or M&A. Very much so. It printed in my mind. But as, again, I mentioned in the intro, you had a fabulous career, and you started a career with Allen & Overy, A&O, as part of their sort of private equity team. So why did you choose A&O?
Well, actually, a bit of a misconception about my sort of early years is I actually really struggled. So I struggled to actually get into the law, which is why I'm actually probably trying to disrupt it so keenly. My A levels, I ended up actually getting BBC in my A levels, and 2 of my Bs, I think from memory, both of them were like 4 or 5 marks off an A. It was that close to having the equivalent of like AAB as opposed to BBC. So when I went to click in to the training contract applications, it was always, do you have 2 A's and a B? And I was like, no. And then it was like, well, then you can't apply, and then sometimes I would be like, well, let's just lie and say that I do. And then in the form say later that the only way I could fill the form in was by lying, but actually my results are this. And then it was no. So I remember I went through a real period of struggling to actually get a training contract. And I suppose unconventionally, I still decided to go through law school. Was very, very grateful to get the backing of my father to actually put me through law school and keep trying. But off the back of that, I was lucky enough to land a paralegal role at Allen Overy and sort of get ingrained within the organization, and worked really that way in the profession. But actually, I never trained at A&O. I tried to train at A&O and was almost promised training by one of the corporate partners there. But as with most of these law firms, I didn't have the grades, so they wouldn't accept me onto the training contract. So sort of unconventionally, I decided, well, this is it. I need to get out. So I actually moved away from A&O and was, went and found an opportunity, which was the next part of my story, where essentially I found an Allen Overy banking partner who believed in me, was building a new team in-house. I suppose due to the fact that I had spent almost 2 years at Allen Overy supporting the corporate team there, he was keen to bring me over, and actually I ended up training in-house, believe it or not. I suppose there's so much to say about that, and I could obviously spill my experience.
Yeah, it'd be good to talk about how you found that experience training in house, and then obviously as a role, extending on that, legal counsel, deputy general counsel at GCM Global Energy. What your responsibilities were given as a legal counsel. Let's start with the training and then go on to the latter.
Yeah, exactly. So I think my training route, although it was non-conventional, I'm incredibly grateful for it. And I talk to people nowadays, and actually at the time, I probably didn't realize how good my training was. And you obviously hear about a lot of juniors in the larger law firms who either get fed up or burn out and just leave the profession entirely. I was the other way around. My training contract fueled me to do more and actually created this real entrepreneurial spirit in me, because my training principles over at the in-house firm were incredibly entrepreneurial. They were building something out of nothing. Obviously, budgets, restricted budgets, weren't allowed to use external counsel. So, it was hands-on, as close as you could possibly get to big law firm training, because lucky for me, because I was lucky, the sort of transactions that I was involved with were very large cross-border M&A transactions. So generally, the law firms on the other side were Magic, Silver Circle, international law firms, very well-known law firms. And I actually remember a lot of my training contract just sitting in a lot of boardrooms over in like Clifford Chance and Norton Rose and Herbert Smith, just listening, just being, on the front lines with the partners, negotiating these contracts and learning firsthand, because there was only 3 of us in this in-house team. So I had to really be there to sort of understand everything that was going on, to then sort of go away and actually work out how to do it with, the two actual senior lawyers on the team. So yeah, incredibly grateful, non-conventional, but I couldn't have wished for a better training experience.
Yeah, and like you say, you've taken so many positives from that, and obviously being in a smaller team, lots of responsibility, and I think just touching on that, I believe, in terms of your general experience, you were advising on acquisitions of oil companies. I think my memory, for example, the sale of a $1 billion of oil assets in Azerbaijan. So, how did you feel about those sort of huge deals, and did you ever get the opportunity to travel to Azerbaijan?
Yes to the traveling. So it's funny that, because you obviously don't do much traveling these days, do you? So yeah. When you tell a client, I'm going to charge you to go on a business class flight to, it just doesn't happen, does it? But yes, back in those days, it was very much, especially with the cross-border transactions. So generally with these cross-border transactions, you get holding companies in, all types of jurisdictions offshore. Due to the nature of where we worked, there was a lot of Cypriot companies. So generally, when you were working on these large transactions, I remember one, wasn't a summer, but it was a very hot time in Cyprus. I essentially was based there for about 2 months, and I was basically told I couldn't come home until the transaction was complete. But it was essentially running around with all these corporate service providers trying to get transactions done. And when you're doing deals of that sort of caliber, it's very hands-on and got to sort of drive transactions forwards towards deadlines. So as a trainee, that was fantastic experience, being involved in these deals.
Yeah, and as I say, it's incredible, and I think I'd encourage people to, we always about that on the show about it's not always about the conventional. The unconventional can sometimes actually turn out to be the better option for you, and clearly in your sense, because you've had all that wonderful experience, and then you've gone on to be an entrepreneur and business founder. So I mentioned again in the intro, you co-founded Overy Law. I think congratulations of 10 years of Overy Law Plus. So what inspired you to co-found the law firm?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for the congratulations. It's not something we do in business, to be honest, but we've got to, and I sort of urge everyone to celebrate those milestones, no matter what it is. It's hard out there at the moment, so we should celebrate. But yeah, I mean, interestingly, I set up the firm with my co-founder Bjorn. He was my senior, and I still treat him as my senior, although we're very much equitably split down the middle. I was only 2 years PQE when we filled in the forms for authorization with the SRA, and I remember them questioning me at the time. What makes you think you're fit to run a law firm at 2 years PQE? And I was incredibly driven, and I explained why, and this passion for all this experience that we had built up in-house as a small corporate team without external counsel, what we could bring to the SME market and disrupt, well, I say interestingly that in 2012 probably needed disrupting. Luckily, it's moved on since then, and there's a lot of disruptive law firms, and the outlook is really good for the market. But back then, creating a corporate boutique, and actually we were a virtual law firm at the time, which you said the word virtual, everyone looked like think you're mad. To try and then go and win a load of corporate business, it was something they didn't really sort of understand. But from a risks perspective, because of the transactional nature of corporate work, they saw it as a low risk, in terms of, well, yeah, they have got all this experience. I see what they've been doing. Okay, green light. It's a fantastic feeling to sort of get that green light.
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing what you have achieved in that period of time. And I just want to sort of go back to what you were saying, because it's important that we do celebrate those mini milestones. I think sometimes, you go in business and it's another day, and you're driving, but actually just taking a step back just to say, wow, we have been doing this for over 10 years. We have been successful. We've done this, we've done that. And obviously I've been following your firm for some time now, and I know we've met at various events, and yeah, I have the utmost respect for what you're doing, and I absolutely applaud particularly the passion of sort of disrupting from your own personal journey, and that's definitely a synergy and something we align with here on the show. So I guess talking to you more as in lawyer mode then, because you frequently provide corporate, commercial and finance English law advice to investors, startup, individuals all around the world. So, what matters have you advised on in recent times, or anything that's particularly stood out to you that you'd perhaps like to highlight?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know where to start. I mean, I suppose every transaction that we work on is incredibly important. Each and every client is incredibly important. So I can't really sort of sit here and name a few, but obviously some are more enjoyable than others. And I think generally in today's society, there is a shift towards sort of more impact-driven businesses. So we as a firm are trying, as part of our sort of our own sustainability goals, to sort of encourage more impactful businesses, and we're sort of building out an impact accelerator to support those sort of businesses that have a focus.
Time for a short break from the show. Are you looking for a way to get your firm working more efficiently and profitably while ensuring a better work-life balance for your team? Well, if you haven't considered our sponsor 𝐬𝐢𝐬𝐬, I'm here to strongly recommend that you do. I absolutely love working with 𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬. Not only is it the world's leading legal practice management and legal client relationship management software, it also has a really solid core mission to transform the legal experience for all, something I personally support. What sets 𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 apart for me, it's their dedication to customer success and support. There are lots of legal softwares out there, but I know from talking to 𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 users that their support offering is miles ahead of the rest, with their 24/5 availability via email, in-app chat, and over the phone. Yes, you can actually call in and speak to someone. 𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 is also the G2 crowd leader in legal practice management, in comparison to 130 legal practice management softwares, and has been for the last 14 consecutive quarters. G2 Crowd is the world's leading business solutions review website. You can check 𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬's full list of features and pricing at www.𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬.legally-speaking. That's www.clio.com/legally-speaking. Now back to the show.
And then, thinking about the matters that we specifically advise, I suppose generally we've had a corporate focus, and I moved probably more away from, although I still largely advise on M&A activity, I sort of moved towards more of a focus in the venture capital world. When we started in 2012, HMRC, our tax authority, created the investor relief schemes in the UK, and as a result, we saw this huge drive in the tech shift of the fundraising market. So we got heavily involved with that early on as a small corporate boutique offering that sort of service. But naturally, as we grew as a firm, we didn't want to lose clients. We saw that we need to have a slightly larger offering than just the corporate niche that we do. So that's when we started to build out more of a hybrid model to Avery Law, where we would bring in expert consultants who are more senior in their field, who we could rely on to actually provide that support service for us. Because we obviously didn't want, the whole point was we're trying to build a disrupt law firm. We didn't want to then lose clients, going back to the larger law firm.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you touched on that. I wanted to delve a little bit deeper because, you specialize in fundraising in the technology sector. So can you sort of explain what fundraising is, please, and maybe how that involves technology?
Yeah, of course. So just in terms of the technology aspect, so most companies in the UK and actually probably globally, the ones that are fundraising or the ones that can get access to funds probably quicker and easier than others are those that have a predominantly tech focus or are tech companies, especially now of the world and the economy. Tech is probably seen as, although it's still incredibly high risk, it's also quite a safe investment in some respects compared to the more commodity based investments, which who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, so fundraising in its basic terms is either a cash injection into a company for shares, so that's an equity fundraise, or it's a debt fundraise, which is essentially a loan, which is to be returned later plus interest. So traditionally we will help companies utilize those methods of fundraising to help them scale and grow their company towards what's known as an exit, which is either a share sale, an asset sale, or a listing.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? Particularly as market swings, whether there's more sort of debt things or more equity things. And yeah, I know we were talking before we got on the sort of podcast about market swings and how things evolve. But you mentioned, and I mentioned as well, you're not just the co-founder, you're also the managing partner of Avery Law. So you're responsible for the management and the culture of the firm. We talk a lot about that in terms of the importance of culture. But what type of culture do you strive to promote for your firm? As you mentioned, you are looking to disrupt and do things differently.
Yeah, so before COVID arrived, obviously COVID's affected, I suppose, the entire market culture for legal professionals. But before that, we very much encouraged, the flexible arrangement and the way of working. But sort of moving forward from that, it's not necessarily about the flexible arrangement. It's more a culture of trust. So whether you're working at home or in the office, it's more of a trust, a sense of ownership, with our team and making them feel ingrained. So I suppose I'm trying to pick all of the really good things about my training experience and encourage that within my team, and then remove all of the bad stuff that I encourage, like the toxic cultures and the screaming and the shouting. That's we don't have any place for that. Very respectful sort of way of working, and promoting people to really harness their own skills, and actually when we delegate, it's actually not really delegating in the sense of the word. It's more what I know what your skills are, what can you bring to this transaction, or actually not even a transaction, when it comes to the management, what do you think about this?
Yeah, and I love that sort of, it's a human side, isn't it? You're saying, look, we don't need to have all of the chaos, let's have the sophisticated, let's have the good stuff, and just be a little bit more human about the whole approach. And yeah, I'm just all for that. So congratulations. And I know under your stewardship, the firm's doing really well. So congratulations once again. And I guess sticking with praise and awards, you were awarded Best Fundraising Lawyer by the SME Awards, I believe, in 2021, and then you're obviously shortlisted for a Rising Star Innovation Award for the Legal Innovation Awards in 2020. So how do you do it?
Well, luckily that one was a nomination. So the best fundraising lawyer was a nomination through some existing clients, which I was incredibly grateful for. And it's taken that long. That was 9 years in the making of working really hard to gain some form of recognition in the market. And it finally pays off. So please keep going, everyone. It's like that Kevin Costner film, The Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come type approach. So, I always encourage people to, if they believe in something, just continue on that journey. Got a vision, go for it. And I've always just had a huge passion for technology and helping people, achieve their targets. And, as a firm, when it comes to fundraising, we don't just provide the legal advice. People talk about a holistic approach to legal services. I mean, that's generally one thing I do preach, and it's one thing, we do quite well, where we actually introduce people, no introduction fees. It's not that type of culture, but we will introduce people to the right investors or the right tech team, the right founders, whoever they need to be in touch with to help them on that journey.
Yeah, no, and it's such a great point as well. And I also just want to sort of reflect on what you said there when it came to the award, because for me, it's another example of, an overnight success story. Not, it takes time, it takes dedication. And like you rightly said, if you do have that vision or you are planning on building something, stick with it, because people are watching and you never know, the only way it won't happen is if you give up. So, yeah, really good advice, and really appreciate you sharing that and just giving a bit of extra context. But like me, I know we're sort of might get a little bit techie here, but you are also a Web3 Metaverse enthusiast, and you post regularly about it on socials, Twitter. I think earlier in 2022, you announced 𝐸𝐸 Law is now available for meetings in your office in the Metaverse, which is cool. So just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I remember that was quite controversial, that one. The market was up and down with comments. Have you thought about data protection? No, I mean, for us, it's and I suppose this mirrors the way our clients work. So you'll see and you'll hear traditionally that tech startups and scale-ups, they pivot, right? They'll come onto a roadblock, or funding will run dry. They'll need to pivot their business and model. 𝐸𝐸 Law has always pivoted. We've always gone, okay, this is not quite working. Where can we move? Because we've not got huge cogs, committees. We don't have that. So we're able to sort of agilely move around. So, and I've talked a lot about this in some of the events where I've talked about the innovation train, in the legal industry. And the metaverse and Web3, well, Web3 is here. The metaverse is here. It's been around for years. You'll read it's been here for 10, 20 years already, but it's only going to get more and more, I suppose, prominent, and you can choose to sort of bury your head or say, well, no, this is just not good. It doesn't really matter. Or you can choose to embrace and get on the innovation train and essentially choose to pivot. And yes, there are risks. There are risks, with everything in business. But on the assumption that our clients are comfortable and they know the risks, and we advise them of the risks, then why should we not? So we've always been a big believer in unifying the journey for the client, being more client-centric. Well, if the client wants to meet in the metaverse, why would we not entertain?
Exactly, and I just love your mindset. And I've since I've delved into this Web3 community, I've got to meet amazing people that are doing things, and people in the US, who their law firms are holding meetings in the metaverse and conferences, because it is absolutely the here, the now, and where things are going. And there's a risk in not taking a risk, and I think there's one of the great quotes. I think somebody I follow, one of my mentors, if you don't risk anything, you risk everything. And so, yes, of course, it has to be your risk tolerance with these things, but you can't go through, particularly for somebody like yourself who's not only a lawyer but running a business. You have to be prepared to take, some elements of risk to be relevant and also fit for purpose, and perhaps even to capture on some early mover advantage, which I definitely think, 𝐸𝐸 Law, when you were talking about that way back when, has done so. And I guess that leads to, we continually do need to look forwards. We continually do need to think about the future. So, what future plans do you have for 𝐸𝐸 Law in the real world and indeed the metaverse?
That's a very good question. It's a bit like when you're filling in the forms for SRA authorization and they want your 5-year business plan and your cash flow forecasts. And, it's like, well, who knows what's going to happen in 5 years' time? But and I think the way the industry's going, yes, obviously we need to plan financially. Yes, we have team, we have overheads. There are all these things that we need to do. But other than that, for us, it's building something that's always going to remain fun. We don't want to be in business just for being in business. We want to enjoy what we're doing as a team. And if we're not enjoying it, why are we in business? So, in terms of the outlook, for us is, yes, we have visions to grow, but actually we don't want to grow to such extent that we just become one of the more traditional law firms. And I think that's probably where we are on the growth journey. And there's that point as a firm where you think, we need to go one way or the other. And that sort of goes back to my pivot point. And I feel like we at Avery Law are at a pivot point. But there's some really interesting things in the market now with what you can do in the legal profession. And we've thought about, and we probably will, already have, launched accelerators and sort of associated, finance houses that would support what we're doing as a business for the purpose of our client.
Yeah, and I love how you're thinking there as well. And it's a really good point about fun, because I was always told by one of my mentors, when the fun stops, stop. We've got to, you've got to enjoy what you do. That's not to say that, every day is going to be a great day, because that's just not the reality of life. And also when people talk about future plans, typically, like you referenced, people are always thinking about, well, is that a number of people you're going to grow to or revenue you're going to get to? Not necessarily, it's what's important to you and what's going to retain that fun. So, equally with us, with our, Casey Partners, our sort of sister company in terms of, the Legally Speaking podcast, it's something new, it's something exciting. Our sort of pursuits, we're taking our journey Web 2 to Web 3, learning new things, encompassing new technologies. That's still growth in itself, and it's exciting. It's not necessarily detected to, okay, we've put another 50 people in seats. So everyone, and I think that's a really important point to make, that, don't be, when people ask you about future plans, it doesn't necessarily have to be purely related to cash and bums on seats. I think, of course, if they're metrics and they're important to you, great, but it could be your own internal growth. It could be understanding and learning new things and other things that would come about it, because I think that puts unnecessary stress and pressure on you, that ultimately having the right people around you can support you to do that. So I just wanted to say thank you for highlighting that, and also just re-stress that point. And I guess before we look to wrap up, David, finally, what advice would you give to lawyers or those in the legal profession wanting to specialize in, let's say, finance or corporate, or particularly interested in getting up to speed with the latest technologies, because things are moving at a pace now?
Well, I mean, in terms of getting up to speed, I mean, there's so many great free resources online. I mean, LinkedIn's obviously a fantastic information platform. Twitter, to be honest, until who knows what happens with whether they need to monetize and have subscriptions, but until such time, Twitter lists, and you can get so much good information online. And actually, to be fair, I do. I get a lot of firsthand, almost live information from online platforms, and it keeps me really ingrained within what's going on in the market. So, for sort of aspiring, lawyers, obviously, it's great to have an interest. Yes, getting into the profession is of course difficult. It still is, although it feels like I've been in it a long time. So maybe maybe I'm a little bit out of the loop now. But just don't give up. Just keep trying. I think remaining driven, and if you are driven as an individual, and don't just get given things on a plate, you will succeed, because that's what, and especially the way the SRA is encouraging alternative law firms to now pop up. Entrepreneurism is really encouraged in the legal, and actually, I personally feel that, clients do prefer that more commercial minded, you said it, Rob, human lawyer approach. Yes, you've got to be a good lawyer, but we're all good lawyers. But, do you have the empathy? Do you, can you actually talk on a more humane level with people?
And that's the secret sauce. That's the 1% that will perhaps win you that trust with the client. Not only being able to put the docs together, but telling them, what's in the docs in very simple language, or, if they have got things going on that are struggles outside of what's being involved, you're being empathetic as, a commercial but business advisor as well as the lawyer. And I think that's something, obviously, you do so well yourself and Avery Law as a firm. And I guess then before we close, I'm sure our listeners will be interested to learn more. So, if they do want to learn more about Avery Law, what's the best way for them to contact you? Feel free also to shout out any social media or website links where they can access information, and we'll also share them with this episode for you too as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I probably, should probably mention there is, for any aspiring lawyers, I'm running a sort of small guild group called the Legal Pioneers. It's a sort of get involved type group. Ask any questions for anyone. But if you specifically wanted to sort of reach out to me, I've done some mentoring in the past, and I will always support mentoring, given the way I got into the profession. People can find me. I'm actually called the Cap Lawyer on LinkedIn. You don't need to search me by name. You can just search the Cap Lawyer. Bit of a funny story there about my cap, but I'll save that for another time. But otherwise, yeah. So you can find out all about us at Avery Law. Avery.law. But feel free. My door is always open. I always have a lot of time for collaboration in the market. It's actually one of the more enjoyable parts of what I do. Running a firm, when I get to collaborate with other firm owners, other lawyers, offer guidance. It's a really pleasurable part.
It's such a great way to end, because it's a really good piece of wisdom, because we've all heard collaboration over competition, but I was recently told, and I think this resonates even more, collaboration is domination. And if you think about that more deeply, it absolutely is. And I'm a big advocate of that, and I know you are as well, David. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure having you, learning more about your journey, what you've been up to. So we'd like to wish you lots of continued success with Avery Law, your future career and future pursuits. But from all of us on the show, over and out.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.